Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Farm Credit and Nutrient Ag Solutions. I'm going to start you off today by looking back at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. Now, this map goes through Sunday morning, and the big features we saw was one large, slow-moving system that rolled through the central United States, delivering some very heavy rainfall. Currently, it's going to be sitting and spinning, still causing some problems across the east. Now, in tandem with that, there was this tropical pulse, one that came out of the Bay of Campeche. It was then followed up by some moisture that came from Hurricane Lydia, which came out of the Pacific Ocean. And the net effect of both of those events was to deliver much more rainfall than originally predicted last week. Now, remember, if you go back to the video, we were expecting heavier rain in here. We talked about it maybe getting into parts of South Carolina, but this system outperformed what we thought. And what was important about this is we were starting to watch some of this region show up on the drought monitor. So now we've brought in better precipitation. We've beat that back once again throughout this area. Now, some local areas, through like this part of Georgia, picked up well over 3 inches of rainfall. It was very heavy rain, but there's still a few drier pockets we have to just consider. Now, before we kind of dig back into what's going on here across the southeast up to the Carolinas, I want to talk a little bit about the Midwest, specifically what's going on with the Mississippi River after, of course, the Missouri comes into it, the Ohio comes into it. I want to talk about this area right into here, which has been missed by some of the recent rains. The Mississippi River right now is at its lowest level on record, and we've got at Memphis, let me be very specific there, at Memphis, Tennessee, it is 11.5 feet below low stage. That is lower than it was a year ago at this time. Now, we think about that because when you look at the whole Mississippi Basin, again, including the Missouri and Ohio, we go down there to 40 inches, 100 centimeters, and we still see significant deficits on kind of the drainage basin for this. But we start to pick up on some of our drier areas too as we work our way toward the Blue Ridge, the Appalachian Mountains. This is still something we have to be paying close attention to here overall. But before I dig into this, I want to offer just some additional perspective. So because of the very low water levels in the Mississippi, this is affecting the way that a lot of the agricultural productivity of the Midwest, kind of leaves the Midwest. And the barge traffic here has been severely disrupted. In addition to that, I want to show you something that's going on down in Mexico, in Central America, and Panama. Excuse me. And this is a 3-month drought indicator map using a data set called CHIRPS. And I want you to focus right in through here. This is where the Panama Canal is. And if you notice, we are at an exceptional drought in that area. Now, we've talked about this a lot at times during the summer. If you follow my normal daily forecast videos too, we've brought this up a few times. But I want to show you what this has done. With both this major waterway, the Mississippi, and now the Panama Canal having major water issues, this is starting to affect kind of global shipping lanes. And one of my favorite websites called marinetraffic.com, you should go check it out, just kind of shows some of the problems. What I've seen a lot is more ships going along the West Coast, many more down here around Brazil, and it's kind of changed global shipping because of the inability to get through the Panama Canal and what's coming up and down the Mississippi River. Now, a lot of what you got going on here, this isn't like parked ships waiting to get up the Mississippi. A lot of this is traffic from, the large oil refineries on the Texas coast and the shipping of oil into the Gulf of and out of the Gulf of Mexico. So I wanted to be clear about that. But great website, marinetraffic.com, just something to go play around with. But if we just come back to some of those precip stats, this would be the month to date. So this was through Sunday. And what it shows here is that the recent rainfall that you saw come into this area really brought these numbers back up into the top half of the distribution. We're still drier throughout much of North Carolina, Virginia, and then back into Tennessee and Kentucky and the northern parts of Alabama and Mississippi, still showing drier for the front half of this month. But as we've talked about week in and week out in all of these videos, what do we expect this whole area to do in the coming months? And we're going to dig into that first today. I'll get to the short range forecast second. I want to dig into the longer range stuff first. So this is where we've been. This is an important lesson we learned about the upper levels of the atmosphere. So the blues represent troughs and the reds represent ridges. And we've had these dominant ridges that have sat over parts of Canada, Greenland, or this one over Europe. And they've been there a while, and that's forced the jet stream to stay pretty far to the south. And it's favored deeper troughs over the east. Now, one of our big problems with getting moisture out of these troughs is that we're on the back side of them, the convergence side, where the air aloft is converging, sinking, drying. We got moisture because we finally got to pull out of the tropics here. That was what the last system did. So we want to know if there's a lot of evidence to continue to favor this type of behavior. Okay, that's the question we're gonna go after here. Now, as you look at this, what I want to remind you is that the the way that the atmosphere has been set up now for several weeks is that the MJO has gotten into phase 8 or phase 1. They're actually both kind of similar in their effects when they're in those phases. I'm going to explain this to you in detail in just a few moments, but I want you to see the effect first. You see, if the MJO in October is in phase 8 and there is an El Nino, we tend to get a lot of ridging here. And that's something important to be watching. Now, what's interesting about this is that up until this point, the ridges that have been across Canada have allowed these troughs that come into the west to move all the way into the southeast. That's what we've seen them do. Sometimes when there's an MJO phase 8, when there's an El Nino, these troughs like to live here a little longer, allowing this, which is above average heights, to slide up into the southeast. And we've not seen that yet. But if the MJO is going to stay in this area, or if it's going to stay over in like phase 1, then we should start to expect some ridging in the southeast, which means we would get rid of the cold signal, and we got that for a few more days, and start to bring in a warmer one. That's one that also opens up the Gulf of Mexico, but not for the southeast. It opens it up more for the midsection of the country. And that's critical for the drought that's there. So this is what I think is going to be happening. Our jet stream from the beginning of October has basically slid to the south down here. This is what pulled that tropical pulse over the southeast last week. We've had an extended branch of the North Pacific jet, making it almost all the way over here, almost to the west coast at times. And there's been troughs that have dipped into this area. Now, just thinking about what this does, or why this did this, I should say, why did it do that? It was because there was sinking motion in the atmosphere between India and Indonesia. And there was rising motion right here. So air is going down in this area and up here. It's also going up over here in Africa. Okay? Now, what does all that mean? Well, if air is ascending in this area and ascending in this area and descending here, it's going to affect the jet stream that goes across North America. That's it in a nutshell. That's the MJO. Phase 1, where the plus mark is, to phase 8. Just number it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's where it is. Now, with that being the case, for the next 15 days, which goes up and down on this diagram, you see this large area of warmer colors I've kind of bounded in here? This is today, all the way through the 30th of October. We see air sinking right here. I'll put an X over it again. And if it sinks in that area, it has to rise somewhere. That's where the blue-greens are, which is here or over here, phase 7, phase 8 of the MJO. We also get some rising motion over here as well. Now, just thinking about the way the atmosphere is kind of breathing up and down, we can look at it on a map view as well. And most of the next couple of weeks, there's going to be a lot of rising motion here where the arrows are diverging, and a lot of sinking motion here where the air is converging. And that's affecting the flow all the way across North America. The MJO right now is in phase 8. And there's a reflection of it over in phase 1, which is over here. And what this seems to be doing in the near term is shifting the position of the jet stream. It's going from a poleward shift, staying extended, but starting to develop a much stronger subtropical piece to it. And this is the jet stream across the Pacific Ocean. Now, I put all those words together, and for some folks watching this, I'm sure, like, get to the point, Snodgrass. I'm showing you what's going on here, but I want to give you the end result. This is what it's going to end up doing. You see, this graphic pulls out a time series of something called the PNA, the Pacific North American Pattern. Now, I talk about that because often what happens on the East Coast is going to be the opposite of the West Coast. And the PNA has been positive for a while. It's going to be positive early this week, late this week, and then next week it's down here. Now, what does all this mean? If the PNA goes up into a bump like this, it almost looks like a ridge, doesn't it? That actually indicates a ridge over the West Coast. And if there's a ridge over the West, we have troughs in the East. So if you see this way up tall like this on this graphic, that means cold East. Cold, cold, and when it dips like this, the whole pattern flips. And that indicates a warm-up. It is not until midweek next week that we get to talk about it, but it's coming. I want to show it to you a couple of ways. This is what the jet stream's doing. See this? There's the ridge that's over the west, deep trough over the east. That's why it's cool to start this week. That's why there's a big low sitting and spinning here. This is through Monday into Tuesday. Look at that. By the end of the week, Friday, another deep trough because there's another big ridge over the west. But we know that early next week, something changes. And the change is here. The jet comes screaming off of Asia, cuts through Japan, goes right into the Bering Sea and makes a hard turn. Now that's not good for jet streams. If they start to meander more north-south than west to east, everything gets blocked up and the downstream starts to change. That's the catalyst for change. So this is next Sunday. We're going to start to see the flow right in the southeast shift. Now watch. Going from Sunday into Monday, what do you see happening here? A trough comes into the west and a ridge begins to build over the southeast. And that's going to shift our pattern around in a big way. Now overall, we start off on the convergent side of a trough and then build in a ridge. And that's why when you look out there and you see the jet stream starting off cool like this, and then getting reinforced cool like this by Friday, and then watching the ridge build in by next Wednesday. See, there it is. That's the flavor of what we're going to be dealing with. That overall is not a wetter pattern. So what we see here is that from eastern Texas through the lower Mississippi River Valley, throughout the southeast all the way to mid-Atlantic, there will be moisture, but it is not wetter than average for the next 15 days. And so while we think about this, I've just got bigger questions as to what could start to bring in better moisture here. Because we have seen some kind of just-in-time rain to keep us away from this whole area going into much more severe drought than could be. Now, some places have been super wet. You're probably watching and thinking, wait a minute, I've had so much rain. No, I know. I'm talking about the broader area of the southeast. That's what we're going to focus on here. Now, before I go any farther, you know that last week it was a system out of the Bay of Campeche that got into this area. For the next 7 or 8 days, I want to keep an eye on this. You see, when we look out there, the models are suggesting that there's tropical development in the East Pacific that once again may cut across Mexico and get pulled into a larger system next week. And anytime I see that, that's moisture on the southern side of a system, we can watch it get pulled over into the southeast. But it's pretty far out there in the forecast. Yes, there is another tropical system over here, but the models have been trending farther and farther away from it being a stronger system and coming toward the southeast. In fact, over the next 10 days, it's not expected to get past the Lesser Antilles, and then all the models are forecasting it to make a hard turn. So I don't think that one's going to be a major influence on what we're going to see. But can you keep this in the back of your mind, because I'm going to come back to this in just a few moments. What my statement was, though, is that we were drier as we go forward to the end of October. But the CPC on Friday released this. And they're predicting above average temperatures for the finish of October and the beginning of November, the first 10 days of November. Now, what's odd to me about this is that I can make a lot of sense out of this pattern if we truly see MJO phase 1, which means dipping troughs into the west more often, ridging here, opening up the Gulf to more moisture transport. What I'm confused about is why they expect the cooler weather to continue in this area with warmth here if the MJO is really going to do that by kicking off deeper lows over the west. So I guess what confuses me is how do we get wet in this area with jet stream flow like this? So it's okay. It's their forecast. I love the fact that our government does this, and they do a fantastic job. I just see it a little differently, and that's okay. There's no problem with that. Their forecast will evolve just like mine does. I have the advantage of giving this to you on a Monday. They made this on a Friday. There may have been better evidence for this last Friday. That's what's up with the atmosphere. It changes all the time. But what I've been watching is the European model. Because if you notice, from the 25th of October, or 26th, to the 25th of November, there's better chances of near normal temperatures here and warmth out ahead of this. Now, the only way you get to that pattern, let me just show it to you in precipitation, is if you've got flow coming in like this with some weaker ridging here to cause the air in the middle to go in that direction. And notice that time period of the 26th of October to the 25th of November is not dry. It's near normal, and it's wetter in this area. And I can find more reasons and more causes to support this than I can find against it. Now, of course, the atmosphere, it's always got some new picture out there 2 to 3 weeks out, and I'm now looking out there 6 weeks. But I'm still anticipating this being something that we could be seeing later on this year. Now, we ask, what's really controlling all of this? Well, let me give you a couple of things here to think about. El Nino continues to build, but right now it is not the front runner in the control of the pattern. What's controlling this pattern is the very warm water still in the Atlantic. It's the fact that there is colder water here in the North Pacific and here. And we have this Indian Ocean dipole thing going. Now, if you've never heard that explained before, it's pretty simple. Just like we have over the Pacific Ocean with El Nino, we have a similar circulation here. See how that cold water? That is caused by strong trade winds blowing in this direction, forcing air to rise. I know I'm drawing this arrow north, but think of that going up, coming back across the open Indian Ocean and sinking here. So what you end up getting is a whole lot of clouds and rain on this side, strong winds allowing for upwelling of cold water here, and then sinking air in that area. Guess where that is? That's right over MJO 345, right in the same area that way back, where was that? Oh, here, I found it. Let's see if we can get that to show back up at the mean. But this is where we expect, there it goes, over the next 15 days for there to be a lot of sinking air in the atmosphere. So all of that is kind of fitting with this picture. I think that is the most dominant teleconnection. And what I think that's going to mean is El Nino, which typically does this, isn't going to quite be looking like this November. So what does El Nino typically do? El Nino in November typically brings a strong subtropical branch of the jet here and here, with the polar branch coming over the top like that. Now remember, anytime your flow in the jet stream is coming out of the north and west, it's dry. It's drier. There's convergence in that flow. You want it to come out of the southwest. And El Ninos typically give you the three arrows I just drew here. Yet the long-range forecast, which we just saw, doesn't show that. And that's because I don't think El Nino is the most dominant thing. There it is. And you saw maybe wetter conditions in through here and near normal in this area, which would suggest the jet's coming in like this. So I still don't see major cause to talk about the risk of large-scale drought developing in the southeast. And I just hinted at it a minute ago. Nearly every long-range model, regardless of what they say, still has wetter conditions for this. And what I mean by regardless of what they say, regardless of their reasoning, nearly every one of them is trying to crank up wet conditions for our front half of our cold season, November, December, January. And this is what it looks like in the National Multi-Model Ensemble. Now, this has been the best performing model this entire year. It got the Midwest drought right back in spring. It got the break in the pattern correct. And it looks like this for November, December, January. And I can buy into this. This makes a lot of sense to me. Okay? So as we move forward, we do need to prepare later this year for above average precipitation to resume. What I want to tell you is, what I want to be very careful of watching is if we end up getting subtropical ridging over Florida or Cuba or the Bahamas, because if that happens, we could really increase our flow early in the season, increasing our late fall severe weather threat. We can still, you know all this, we can get storms in late fall that are pretty nasty. So before the cold weather sets in, we got to watch out for that. All right, let's move on to temperature discussion. Right now, here on Sunday night, we've got frost and freeze warnings out for the midsection of the country. Pretty windy up here in Montana, and nothing for the Carolinas. If we just kind of take a look at what we're going to do here, in fact, let me go back to some precipitation stuff before we do temperatures. Let me at least give you an idea on what to expect. On Monday, scattered showers are possible with some scattered and broken clouds. What's all that coming from? This deep low that spent all last week rolling through the midsection of the country. So you can just see some scattered showers coming in here on Monday. Once we get into Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, I kind of played that quickly because it may only be some coastal showers that we'll be talking about. Once we go from Thursday into Friday, there's a deeper low that forms over the eastern Great Lakes, actually the central Great Lakes over toward the eastern Great Lakes. And then once we go through Friday into Saturday, that low starts to pull farther to the east. Now remember, this is when that second deeper trough comes in. So that's why you get the cooler, wetter conditions later on in the week. This is Saturday morning, and we're going to have probably a windy, I'm going back and forth here, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're probably going to have a windy and cool weekend coming up. But then it all flips after that. And after next week starts, you see high pressure build in. Look at that. And the flow is now dipping here. And a big low is going to come out of this part of the country when whatever this tropical system is gets pulled into it. Ready? This is next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Now we want to know if that moisture, which originated in that tropical system, finally gets over to us. But this model only runs out 10 days. So when we add up all that precipitation, it looks something like this. Let me show you the timing of this. Ready? Here's a little bit of the scattered showers we could get here early in the week. See that? Not much, but there could be some scattered showers. Actually, there could be some snow at the peaks of the Appalachian Mountains here as well. Then we're going to go into Wednesday. We know not a whole lot going on until Thursday. Now watch, remember Friday, the weak system rolls through, tries to bring in some precip. Then we got to get through the weekend, which is cooler. And then we start to warm up big time next week. And we're going to wait on that next system to roll through. To zoom in here and just to kind of show you total amounts, I know it's showing nothing, but there will still be scattered showers in this area early this week, okay? Then the next big push, here it is. This is the weekend system. That's going from Friday into Saturday. Widespread 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch is what we're looking at, maybe heaviest in the Appalachian Mountains. And then we get into that system. You're going to start to see it show up here by next Tuesday, Wednesday, but that's still pretty far out for us. And that's why most of our next 15 days is drier. We had shots at precipitation, but overall it's relatively dry. If you're curious, this is the probability of staying less than a 1/2 of an inch. And you notice that throughout most of Ag South territory, those probabilities are 50 to 80%. So this is not the wet setup. But as we look out there farther, the week 2 pattern begins to make the shift. The CPC is increasing the activity here, Europeans increasing the activity here, and so is the GFS. And this is going to move. And so we're going to have to wait to see it move toward us after midweek next week. So that's kind of the setup on our precipitation. Now a bit about the temperatures. Okay, this is the risk of a frost over the next 7 days. The west is going very mild over the next 7 days, then very cold the following week. In the middle, we have the multiple shots of colder air. So widespread frost, some of it getting down here as far south as like Amarillo, maybe almost down to Lubbock. You then see right in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Appalachian Mountain chain here, some cold temperatures right at the highest peaks. What our temperatures actually look like, well, this is what we saw on Sunday. Let's get into Monday, still another cool one. Tuesday, same thing. Watch the west warm up, though. We stay cooler than average through Wednesday, out into Thursday. And as you know, by Friday into Saturday, another front comes through. But this is what's coming toward us. Now watch. Next 5 days, cold. Well, colder. Day 5 through 10, that's the end of it. Here we go. This is the pattern flip. The P&A goes negative. Watch the temperatures. They shift, which means we finish October on a very warm note. Maybe you trick or treat under some warm conditions here. The cold comes into the west. The instability, the chaos is in the middle, and that'll progress farther to the east. That's what I got for you in the short term. You saw the long term at the beginning. We talked about some of the big global factors at the beginning. Let's come back to a couple of those global factors, to finish this up. I want to give you the latest on the planting progress out of Mato Grosso, the biggest producing state in Brazil. Just for reference, you can fit 9 Indianas inside of this state. It's the north-central part. They grow a lot of corn and soybeans. Right now, they are at 35% planted on their soybeans. Remember, by the end of October, they need to be about 80 to 90% planted. They're ahead of the 5-year average by 7%. They're behind last year by 6%, but still, they're moving. Excuse me. Next 10 days, very warm throughout Brazil. Cold north-central Europe, very warm in Siberia. This is critical. This is an area that we watch for early season snowpack so that we can start to see the polar regions affecting our weather, not just the tropics. Have you noticed I focused only on the tropics with your long range, like the MJO or the Indian Ocean Dipole or El Nino? We've yet to talk about things going on in the Bering Sea, which is here, or the Chukchi Sea, which is a part of the the Arctic, or what's happening with the sea ice in the North Atlantic. All of those things will become factors very soon in the forecast. But right now, it's pretty warm north. From here, I want to show you the precip, though, because we watched the models trend drier for this next 7-day time period throughout much of Brazil, while keeping it very wet in southern Brazil. Weekend model trends got much wetter in Argentina, which is still under deep drought, which is critical. Again, otherwise, tropical system here, going to stay away. We're going to watch this tropical system there. Very wet and stormy throughout Europe, including all the way over here into parts of Ukraine and the Russian wheat belt. And we see Australia going over drier, which we would expect given that this is where the sinking motion is in the atmosphere. So I want to give you that brief update and remind you that we'll keep updating this long-range forecast each week as we just kind of see more of the pieces coming together to kind of hope it makes some sense. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Tell you all to have a great week. I look forward to giving another update next Monday. Thank you.